Hi Virgo, welcome to your May 2020 Astro Update. It's Serena here, and I'm recording this on May 1st. There was a time back in the day, actually, in a few days, it's going to be my 5th anniversary having a business and having a YouTube channel where I do these kinds of forecasts. And I remember I thought it was just like beyond the pale to actually post videos on the first of the month for that month. And now I don't even care. I have a moon in Virgo. Maybe there was something about that in a perfectionistic sort of way. But in any case, this is a month, as in all months, where you do have an emphasis on career, especially towards the end of the month when more planets go into Gemini. Actually, it changes year to year, and Mercury will be going into your 10th house earlier in the month, and we have a new moon earlier because it's an early degree of Gemini. So, it varies, but it's always in the same basic time period. So if you reflect back to prior years, think if you tend to have career opportunities, advancement at this time of the year, because you might notice a pattern. But as we begin the month, the sun is actually in a fellow earth sign, and that's nice because that forms a trine. So everything seems a lot more copacetic, if you remember that word. Actually, somebody from the 60s told me that word, who actually was an adult in the 60s. I was born in the 60s. And I don't hear it very often, but it's just a nice time when things may run smoothly. And when the sun is in Taurus, which it will be until the 20th. For you, this is the 9th house. And this is a philosophical place. It's just about mind expansion, so it also includes anything connected to academia, whether you're teaching or studying. And you may not be at this time, but you may be like perusing catalogs or planning a course of studies in the future. And what else? And travel, long distance travel. Now, because of the situation that is going around, I notice people don't say exactly what I'm talking about. And I think there might even be something on YouTube with that where they're afraid of being flagged. So they're dancing around the terminology for some reason. So I'm going to do it too because I just, it gets so weird sometimes. So I'm going to dance around it too. But there's actually certain situations, obviously, where we can't do those kinds of things, like enter college or finish, graduate, if that's something that you were planning on, or even beginning it. And this has nothing to do with age. This has to do with, because a lot of people do go back later on, but whatever it is that you're doing, it's because of world events. But you still might be, for some reason, that might be a planning stage, or even like long distance travel. I was just talking to somebody, and he said, "Oh, well, people aren't traveling these days." And he said, "I might be on the plane all by myself." And I said, "Well, that might be a good thing, It's like, why would that be a bad thing? But so I don't even know what it's like out there in terms of traveling, what the restrictions are, but you still may be, if you had to postpone a trip, you might be like still planning it out. And so that's the other thing, too, about the ninth house that's really important is even with your direction in life, because the sun is going to go from the ninth to the 10th house. So for those Virgos who are interested in anything that has to do with religion or maybe even being a life coach. I was going to say philosophy, but it's all in that similar vein, positive thinking, that can be something that you are preparing for, perhaps with some kind of, if you go to classes or, if you're getting some kind of a training in that area. And on the 20th, the sun goes into the 10th house, and so it really is about career. But it could be connected to the ninth house, in some cases. The ninth house can also be maybe, since Mercury is actually in this house, you're doing something, maybe you're learning from a distance, even with the university level. You can certainly do that. And language can be featured here, foreign language. And then the sun goes into the 10th house, so maybe you're teaching English as a second language, or whatever your native language is, you're teaching it, and travel and the career are combined. So that's a possibility for some of you because of the sun going into both these houses this month. So in general, your career sector heats up. On the 7th, we have a full moon at 18 degrees of Scorpio, and that for you is the third house, and that is a house of certifications and skills. So maybe you're finishing up something along those lines that have to do with that opposite ninth house. And, if you're at learning English, how to teach English as a second language, which I actually have credentials in myself. If I ever get my teaching certificate, then I'll really have them. But that could be something that you're finishing up, or any kind of certification. It can also be, coming to kind of some crisis or realization with a sibling, brother or sister. And by the way, the 10th house can be your father. So, this could be in the family with 10th and 3rd houses activated. And so, in some cases, having enough and saying, I've tried and tried and it never works out, so screw it. Or realizing what they've been through. Maybe you didn't know that they had gone through something and now you realize it. So it's like you gain a new appreciation for them because you've realized that they have been dealing with stuff. And then and also, by the way, the 3rd house can be neighbors and people, in your local area. And so that could also play into it if you're kind of, you might even be done with where you live and want to relocate because of, either because you don't like certain aspects of it, or you feel like you're finished there. I was going to say you've done your time, but, whatever that means. And then on the 11th, Mercury goes into Gemini. So Mercury is in that 10th house of career. Now, I will get to that in a moment because we are having a retrograde in this house, and that will be very interesting. But Mercury is definitely here. You may be speaking to people in positions of authority for some reason, or you have the authority. Your voice is valued because of your expertise, and other people are listening to you for some reason. On the same day, Saturn goes retrograde at 1 degree of Aquarius. Now, this is your 6th house of work. I have already done a video for Virgo separately. By the way, this particular recording is for Virgo Sun and Rising. So I've already done a Saturn video. You can check it out on my channel. Look for my playlist. It should be there. If for some reason I didn't include it, I did do one for Saturn, for Virgo. How this can play out is you have it in the 6th house, and this may make you rethink what you do for a living. This is your house, by the way. I really feel, though, that the influence isn't going to be necessarily that great because Saturn is only at 1 degree of Aquarius, and by July it's going to go back into Capricorn, so it's going to go back into your 5th house. And so to me, that's where a lot of the influence of the retrograde is going to be, not in the 6th house, but the 5th house. And that is a house that's already loaded. And you have Jupiter there, which is actually a saving grace because you have these heavies going in there like Saturn, and Pluto is there. You have the north node, the south node, but the south node is leaving. And I'm going to be doing a separate set of videos for the transiting north and south nodes. I really did not include, which I should have. I'll just mention it very briefly, that on May 5th, the north node is going to go from Cancer, which it happens to be your 11th house, into Gemini, that 10th house. And that's the way that the north and south nodes transit. They transit what we call backwards or clockwise. So this is another signal that the next 18 months are pretty, I would call them crucial for your career. Or you could call it a particularly a period of destiny where either it could be very lucky. I mean, to me, it seems like it's a lucky period because it's with the North Node, it's like where you're meant to be. And that means that things may just really conspire on your behalf. But I was just watching another astrologer who put it completely differently. So who knows? But anyway, so that's another thing that's happening. But I'll be doing a separate video on that. So just speaking about Saturn in the 6th house retrograding, this may make you less motivated when it comes to like health regimens, and since you rule this house, you may really be somebody who is quite disciplined, and you like your particular diet and things like that, and you may let that go for a while because and people do that, not necessarily in a bad way. Maybe you feel like you've been too strict with yourself. It doesn't have to be a bad thing, actually. And in terms of career, you may say, what am I building here? Am I doing something that I really feel like this is the future for me, or is this something that has run its course? Because with all these transits in the 10th house happening, the difference between the 6th and the 10th house for me is that the 10th house is the glory or the status, and so you're kind of doing all the work at the 6th house level. And yes, I think that the 6th house can indicate the type of work you're doing as well. And depending on what planets are transiting through there, it may indicate, even when you look at the 10th house, what conditions are going to be there. So for instance, with Saturn transiting through the 6th house, there may be more work requirements. you may feel like you have to work harder, or Saturn tends to be very dedicated and serious about things and feels a sense of duty and all that. So that may make you even more, have a stronger work ethic in a sense. But when it's retrograde, you might say, what am I doing this for? Especially if you have added responsibilities. That could certainly be with Saturn in the sixth house, and that might not sit well with you because maybe you have to work longer hours and you don't like that. And so you may kind of really rethink that. And then the reason I'm saying this is because with Saturn going back into the fifth house, this may have something to do with starting your own business. And you may say, you know what? I kind of like this idea more and more every day. I could do this on my own. I don't need to work for somebody else. And then I can have my own hours. Because the sixth house can be your daily schedule. And that can, with Saturn there, can feel like a millstone around your neck where you feel like you have to, show up earlier and stay later. And you're not feeling that at all. On the 13th, Mars goes into Pisces. So Mars is, here, I didn't even pay attention to that because actually Mars will be in that sector of the sixth house until the 13th. So that could be kind of hinting at some sort of workplace drama and maybe conflict, and that is also playing into your rethinking of things. Mars in the 7th on the 13th can indicate relationship conflict, but it can also be that you're just kind of really getting involved with your partner more. Perhaps there's something where you have been not with your partner as much as you wanted to be because of the demands in the workplace, and now that something has eased up, you're able to spend more time with your partner, and the two of you are doing things together. And I'm just going to bring this up because Mars can be sex drive. That may be coming roaring back to life between you and your partner and significant other, and that could indicate that there's more sexy time for you two. And the seventh house can be legal matters. So if there's a lawsuit, you may be actually doing a lot of court stuff, going to court every day. And then on the same day, Venus turns retrograde in the 10th house of career. So there may be some kind of money situation happening. Venus retrograde can be, though, more of an internalized thing where you're thinking about what you're doing for a living and whether it matches up with your values. And for Virgo, these can involve even things that have to do with the earth. So for instance, if you're working, and if you work, let's say you work in the healthcare industry, because to me, I always say that, and I think I'm right about this, that the house that you rule, the sixth house, it's health, but I always think of natural health. I think that Virgo is the herbologist, if I'm not mistaken. So a knowledge of natural remedies and things like that may be right up your alley. Natural diets, especially vegetarianism, I think it's associated with Virgo. And I don't really know why, except that maybe because of earth and herbs and plants and stuff like that. But anyway, you might be somebody, let's say you do work in the healthcare industry and you were attracted to that because of the health angle, and then you have been rethinking it and you think, I don't like the outcomes for the people. I can see that it's not helping them. They're not healing, and I want to really heal them. And who knows, maybe there is something with even energy medicine because you've had recent transits in the 8th and ninth houses. So that could certainly come into play. But yeah, it could be something on that level. If there's anything monetary that feels like it's kind of grinding to a halt, or, well, it wouldn't be that much because Venus can be money. But if, like, maybe you were thinking about you wanting a raise or asking for a raise and that didn't materialize, and perhaps that's why you did take extra work on because you're hoping to get that. That could be under review. But this is a relatively short transit compared to some of these transits. And Venus will actually go direct on June 25th, so do not get too hung up on that. The very next day, Jupiter goes retrograde. And one thing that I have been mentioning, and I haven't heard other astrologers mention this, I don't know if I'm, qualified for being an astrologer long enough to even, kind of like speculate on this, but I get this feeling that Venus and Jupiter retrograde, the fact that they are retrograding not only in the same month, but one day apart from each other in the middle of May, that almost gives me a good feeling because both of these planets are connected to money. And Venus is a personal planet, and Jupiter is kind of in between. It's not an outer planet. And it's not an innie. It's not an outer or an innie. It's in between, and it doesn't have that long of a retrograde. I mean, it has, it retrogrades. I mean, it doesn't have that long of a transit through a sign. I mean, it's 1 year, but it's surely longer than a personal planet. But the point being that it does, to me, it might impact us more personally. And if you're watching or listening for this for Virgo sun and your rising sign is either Sag or Pisces, then your ruler, you could say, even with Pisces, it's the ancient ruler, Jupiter, but definitely with Sag. So you're ruled by Jupiter, and this is more influential for you. But in any case, I feel like this could have quite a positive trend given our current circumstances where these retrogrades are a rebounding of sorts, where even though they are retrograding, they are kind of giving us these blessings that we were missing for 2 months. So, and that's an interesting point too, because where I come from, that's when everything shut down was around this time. Was around like the 16th, and so we're talking about like mid-month. So that to me is almost like a good omen. So we shall see if that manifests in that way. For you, Jupiter is your 5th house, and this is, now that Jupiter's in the 5th house, I think that everything has gotten a bit brighter for you because the 5th house is always a nice place. It's a place of pleasure, of fun activities, parties, sporting events, concerts, anything artistic. Love is 5th house. Children, conceiving children, but children in general. And did I say creativity? Creative projects and the business that you own. And so you may get some kind of an opportunity to, keep going with that. If you kind of abandoned it, you may get an opportunity to kind of push out with that in some way. And so also, again, with Jupiter, it's kind of like, the kind of like the Venus is your values and how, how meaningful it is to you. And Jupiter, it can be more of the ethics, the, how this is impacting you on a spiritual level. So if you're single, Jupiter in the fifth house can be very good for meeting a mate. You may get a lot of opportunities, but you're going to have Saturn coming back here, and Saturn has been here for several years, and you may have been very serious about finding a long-term partner when Saturn has been in this house. And now that Saturn is not there at this present time, but Jupiter is here, you might be like, hey, I think I am going to kind of play the field. I don't really feel the need to settle down at this time. And who knows, you might find that there are a lot of people that are interested in the fact that you're on the market. And then on the 22nd, there's a new moon at 2 degrees of Gemini, so a very early degree of Gemini, and in the 10th house of career. So that's really great, because you may find that at the end of this, in the last 10 days of the month, that you have a much greater, or 9 days, I should say, more opportunities present themselves. And if you are by any means discouraged about your job at the moment, this may brighten up your life during this last week, because you may feel that you have more opportunities, that you're not just kind of like stuck. Because with Saturn having gone into that 6th house, you may have felt kind of oppressed in some ways with what you were doing. Maybe a new manager came in and changed everything around, and it felt like a lot more heavy, a lot less enjoyable, and you kind of were doing it. You're kind of I'm not saying you were mailing it in, but you're doing it out of a sense of duty, not a sense of really wanting to do it. So things may kind of turn around in that regard for you. Because even Jupiter in the 5th house, you may feel more positive about starting your own business. And if you are currently saying, okay, because a lot of times, even if you start your own business, you're not necessarily going to be able to just make a living from it. So you might be still looking for a new job. And, with Mercury in the 10th house, and the fact that you're ruled by Mercury, this makes it a good time for you to talk to people in positions of authority. And with Venus there may be somebody who puts in a good word for you because they want to help you. And this may be from some other place that you had applied to, or who knows, that you may hear from. Okay, Virgo, that's what I have for you. If you'd like a personal reading, the link is below to my website. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.